Imagine a world 2 million years ago where an extraordinary species roamed the earth. Not modern humans like us, but a species that would live for about 20 times longer than us. Their story is not only fascinating, it is the ultimate story of human success and resilience. Meet Homo erectus. Literally, the most successful human species in history. If you use them to sleep, then I literally make them. So subscribe and tell me where you are and when. I check the comments and it's like Berlin for breakfast, Boston at bedtime, all in one. What makes their journey so special? They surprisingly lived long enough to walk this planet for 2 million years. That's a time span that our brains struggle so enormously to comprehend. For perspective, our own species, Homo sapiens, has only been around for about 300,000 years, and we are essentially the new kids on the evolutionary block. Although Homo erectus, these incredible ancient humans, dominated the Earth's landscape across 3 continents for a time that made our entire existence seem like an invisible spectacle, I'm going to take you on a journey through time where you'll discover how these ancient humans lived, what they looked like, how they thought, and why they are so important to our understanding of what it means to be human. You'll discover why many scientists consider Homo erectus to be the first true humans in our evolutionary story. A species that is more similar to us than any other animal that came before them. They looked like us, moved like us, and probably communicated with us in an amazingly similar way. And here's something mind-blowing. They weren't just primitive cavemen who wandered around with basic tools. Recent discoveries have revealed their incredibly advanced abilities, from making sophisticated stone tools to building shelters and even showing evidence of caring for their elderly and infirm. Their resilience to changing environments and the movement of dangerous predators has literally laid the foundation for our existence today. Let's put their incredible journey into perspective. Homo erectus first appeared around 2 million years ago and as recently as 100,000 years ago. That's right, the last populations of Homo erectus were still thriving on Earth at the same time our own species was beginning to spread across the planet. The last known Homo erectus fossils come from Nandong on the Indonesian island of Java, where archaeologists discovered a dozen skull caps and 2 shin bones from around 108 to 117,000 years ago. This naturally raises an interesting question. Did Homo erectus and Homo sapiens ever meet? Did our ancestors ever meet these ancient humans who dominated the planet for so long before us? It's an intriguing possibility that researchers have been investigating for decades. We know that Homo sapiens left Africa and migrated to Europe and Asia around 90,000 years ago. In fact, that timeline is being pushed back with new discoveries. A Homo sapiens fossil found in Israel's Mislia cave dates back to 177 to 194,000 years ago, which seems to have left Africa much earlier than previously thought. But here's where it gets interesting. The oldest evidence of Homo sapiens in Java, where Homo erectus made their last stand, is 60 to 70,000 years ago. So, unfortunately, it seems that Homo erectus didn't survive long enough in Java to come into contact with modern humans. And frankly, no fossil evidence anywhere else in the world conclusively proves direct interaction between Erectus and modern humans. But wait, this story takes an unexpected twist from a very unlikely source. Head lice. Yes, you heard that right. According to research published in the Public Library of Science Biology, human head lice actually come from two ancient lineages that diverged about 1.18 million years ago, a time when Homo erectus was thriving, but long before modern Homo sapiens existed. One lineage of these head lice is found worldwide and experienced a population bottleneck around 100,000 years ago, consistent with the spread of modern humans. But another lineage, found only in the Americas, remained separate for a full 1.18 million years.
The split between these lineages coincides with the early Homo erectus divergence, indicating that they evolved alongside different human species. If these lice did indeed evolve with Homo erectus 1.18 million years ago, their presence in modern humans suggests that direct transfer occurred, which would have required physical contact between Homo erectus and early Homo sapiens. But since no fossil evidence supports direct interaction, scientists are skeptical. The evidence for lice represents one of the many intriguing mysteries surrounding these ancient humans that researchers are still working to solve. The first Homo erectus fossil was discovered in 1891 by a Dutchman named Eugene Dubois. After years of searching for what scientists at the time in Indonesia called the missing link between apes and humans, Dubois discovered a well-preserved skullcap at Trinil on the banks of the Solo River on the island of Java. The specimen had prominent brow ridges, a receding forehead, and an angled back skull, which Dubois claimed represented an evolutionary link between apes and modern humans. Other scientists initially dismissed his interpretation, but Dubois was finally vindicated when similar Homo erectus fossils were discovered in China in the 1920s and 30s. These discoveries confirmed that this was indeed a widespread human species that lived across vast areas, across Africa, Asia, and Europe. One of the most remarkable things about Homo erectus was their evolutionary journey toward larger brain sizes. Early members of the lineage had a cranial capacity of 600 to 800 cubic centimeters, such as the Demi skull found at the Demi site in Georgia, which had proportions closer to those of earlier Australopithecines than to later humans. But over time, as they faced new environmental challenges and adapted to different habitats, their evolution saw dramatic increases in brain size and complexity. Homo erectus cranial volumes of up to 1,230 cubic centimeters have been found in the central plains of Africa, Asia, and Europe, reaching a size comparable to Albert Einstein's brain. This is incredible because large, complex brains could process and store more information, allowing for more sophisticated behavior and adaptations. Homo erectus had a distinctive appearance that set them apart from their predecessors and from us modern humans. They were the first humans to have a relatively flat face and a prominent nose. This is thought to have helped them retain moisture while breathing the dry air in the diverse environments they lived in. But unlike modern humans, they also had a flat, strong, low skull with large brow ridges. These prominent brow ridges have fascinated scientists. What purpose did they serve? In 2004, anthropologists Noel Boaz and Russell Siachan made some surprising suggestions. They proposed that these features arose from a cultural practice in which Homo erectus fought each other with fists, stones, or sticks to settle disputes or compete for mates. Their skull structure appears to be remarkably well designed to absorb heavy blows. The heavy brow-breaking part protects the eyes and covers the ears, transforming into a bar that connects to the back of the skull. This means that an injury to any of these areas can effectively spread throughout the skull. Surprisingly, many fossil skull caps show severe fractures that would be normally debilitating, yet they also show signs of healing, indicating that these individuals survived potentially fatal head injuries. Anthropologist Peter Brown has suggested a similar reason for the unusual density found in modern Australian Aboriginal skulls, which is the result of a custom common among Central and Southeastern Australian tribes in which opponents would hit each other with sticks until they were knocked out. These prominent brow-breaking parts may therefore be both a social signal of strength and dominance and a practical adaptation to strengthen the skull against injury. As humans evolved into our modern form, we gradually lost these obvious features as social communication became more important, allowing us to read the subtle emotions in each other's faces.
Our entire facial structure changed to prioritize communication over physical protection. Their jaws were also much more powerful than ours, larger and thicker without a delicate chin. In terms of teeth, Homo erectus had the thinnest enamel of any early human species. In addition to protecting teeth from breakage when eating hard foods, it also made it difficult for the teeth to cut through hard foods. Their mandibles were noticeably thicker than those of modern humans and living apes, which would have helped prevent torsion when biting or chewing their jaws, which could have caused unusually strong pressure during eating. Interestingly, their teeth showed a higher frequency of cavities in their premolars and molars than earlier species like Homo habilis. This suggests a diet rich in brittle foods, perhaps influenced by their use of advanced tools, which enabled them to process a wider range of foods than their predecessors. Like modern humans, Homo erectus varied greatly in size, ranging from 4'9" to 6'1" in height and 40 to 68 kilograms in weight. This variation was likely due to regional differences in climate, mortality, and nutrition among primates. This level of phenotypic plasticity, the ability to show pronounced physical responses to environmental stresses, is actually very rare and is only seen in modern humans and Homo erectus. Homo erectus exhibited sexual dimorphism, with noticeable differences in size and sometimes other physical characteristics between males and females. In general, male Homo erectus individuals were larger and more robust than females. This sexual dimorphism is inferred from fossil evidence, which includes differences in skeletal size and morphology. Footprints made by at least 20 different individuals, dating back more than 971,500 years from Illirit, Kenya, indicate that Homo erectus was more sexually dimorphic than modern Homo sapiens, although less so than higher dwarf apes like gorillas and extinct species like Auranopithecus, Apricus, and Paranthropus robustus. These footprints provide a unique window into an important transitional period in human social behavior, suggesting a social structure somewhere between the extreme male-dominated great ape groups and the more egalitarian structures of modern humans. These same footprints also reveal something remarkable about the migrations of Homo erectus. They indicate that Homo erectus was the first species of the human lineage to have a modern human gait.
Footprint and skeletal evidence suggest that their limb structure and proportions were similar to those of modern humans, indicating a human-like locomotion that would have been much more efficient for long-distance travel than the earlier hominids. Homo erectus was the first in our lineage to have human-like shoulders, indicating the ability to throw at high speeds. This adaptation would have been a major evolutionary advantage, enabling them to effectively hurl stones, wooden spears, or other weapons, making it easier to hunt large prey for valuable caloric meat. This was in sharp contrast to their early hominid predecessors, such as Homo habilis, who still had chimpanzee-like shoulder girdles that were well-suited for precise throwing. When we look at the fossil record, it becomes clear that Homo erectus represents a dramatic shift in human evolution. The rise of a species that, while different from us in many ways, possessed a suite of physical and cognitive adaptations that would define the human lineage for millions of years to come. They were not simply slightly improved versions of earlier hominids. They were a revolutionary new breed of humans, with bodies built for endurance, precision, and adaptability. But their physical adaptations were only the beginning of what made Homo erectus so extraordinarily successful. In our next section, we will explore one of their most distinctive and surprising features, their surprisingly hairless bodies, and discover how this seemingly simple adaptation played a crucial role in their evolutionary success, setting the stage for the development of the large brains that would eventually define our own species.
We will also delve into their remarkable tool technology, hunting strategies, and social structure, all elements that helped make them the most successful human species in evolutionary history. Join me as I continue this incredible journey through time to understand our most successful ancient relatives. As primates and mammals, we humans have a unique characteristic that sets us apart from most of our evolutionary cousins: relatively hairless skin. Although aquatic mammals such as whales, dolphins, and elephants share this trait, most primates and mammals are usually equipped with a hairy covering. So when did humans lose their body hair, and why? It turns out that Homo erectus was the first member of the genus Homo to develop this hairless condition, with research showing that this adaptation emerged at least 1.2 million years ago. But to understand why humans have significantly less body hair than other primates, we have to acknowledge that the body hair of the mammalian is not just an aesthetic feature. It protects the skin from wounds, parasites, heat, cold, and ultraviolet radiation. So why did an early human species evolve to lose this protective covering? The most widely accepted evolutionary explanation is heat dissipation. When early members of the genus Homo moved from living in shady forests to open savannas, losing body hair and developing more sweat glands made it easier for them to cool down during prolonged physical activity. This environmental change triggered a major shift from a largely vegetarian to an increasingly hunter-gatherer diet. The need to regulate body temperature increased dramatically as they chased prey across the hot savanna. And this is where things get really interesting. Anthropologist and paleontologist Nina Jablonski has proposed that the ability to remove excess body heat through efficient sweating actually enabled the dramatic growth of the most temperature-sensitive human organ, the brain.
So the loss of fur wasn't just about keeping cool. It potentially made it easier to make both physical and behavioral adaptations that set humans apart from other primates. Some researchers believe that sexual selection accelerated these changes. By choosing more hairless mates, Homo erectus may have accelerated changes initially caused by natural selection pressures. This hairless adaptation raises another interesting question. What about skin color? Most mammals have light skin covered in fur, and biologists believe that early human ancestors started out that way too. But that changed with Homo erectus. Genetic analysis suggests that high activity of the melanocortin-1 receptor gene, which produces dark skin, dates back to around 1.2 to 2 million years ago in Homo erectus. Dark-colored pigments, specifically melanin, act as a natural sunscreen, helping to prevent skin damage and reduce the risk of conditions like skin cancer in areas with high sun exposure. Having dark skin would have given Homo erectus a survival advantage by providing better protection against the sun's harsh rays. However, as Homo erectus populations expanded to higher latitudes due to less intense sunlight, their skin lightness may have increased to prevent vitamin D deficiency. Consider the model of modern human migration. The earliest sapiens emerged in Africa under the tropical sun, then migrated to Asia and expanded to cover Europe. Since Homo erectus had more time to spread and adapt across Asia and Europe, it is reasonable to assume that they showed similar skin tone flexibility as modern human populations today. Supporting this theory, a 500 to 300,000-year-old Homo erectus specimen from Turkey contains the first known case of tuberculous meningitis, which is usually more prevalent in dark-skinned people living at higher latitudes due to vitamin D deficiency. This suggests that this individual may have had dark skin in an environment where light skin would have been advantageous, perhaps indicating that skin color adaptations were still evolving in this northern Homo erectus population. Another interesting aspect of Homo erectus biology concerns brain development.
A 1.88 million-year-old Homo erectus specimen found in Java named Mojo Sarto I, who died at about 1 year of age, already had an average brain size of 72 to 84%. Compare that to modern 1-year-old humans who typically reach about 50% of their adult brain size. This reveals something remarkable. The trajectory of Homo erectus brain growth was faster, more ape-like than modern humans. This suggests that Homo erectus was probably not cognitively comparable to modern humans, and that our long childhood and the period required for brain maturation meant that long-term dependence developed much later in human evolution. Perhaps in the case of the last common ancestor of modern humans and the Neanderthals. Although Homo erectus did not reach the intellectual capacity of modern humans, they were still at the top of the cognitive hierarchy on the planet at their time. Their larger brains and advanced tools suggest greater problem-solving ability and social sophistication than earlier human species. Some scientists distinguish between African erectus, which they call Homo ergaster, and Asian erectus, which they call Homo erectus stricto, because their features are slightly different. For example, African individuals have higher foreheads and less wide foreheads across the eye sockets. However, it is worth noting that modern humans today also show regional variation in physical characteristics, and we are not divided into separate species. Many scientists now simply group them together as Homo erectus, which not only makes more sense in terms of classification, but also makes it easier to discuss their evolutionary history. Speaking of evolution, where did Homo erectus come from? It is generally agreed that Homo erectus descended from an earlier species, Homo habilis, an early member of the genus Homo that still had ape-like features, including long arms and a moderately prognathous face. This transition occurred about 2 million years ago. However, this simple evolutionary path has been questioned because fossils of Homo habilis and Homo erectus indicate that they coexisted for at least 500,000 years. This overlap suggests that a specific, isolated group of Homo habilis evolved into Homo erectus, while other Homo habilis populations remained unchanged, or that Homo erectus may have descended from a primitive Homo species that has yet to be discovered. Fossils dating back about 2 million years have been found in both Africa and China, and there is also intense debate about where Homo erectus evolved. A 2011 study found that Homo erectus first arrived from Africa in West Asia, and that early Homo erectus evolved there before spreading to East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa, where they eventually evolved into modern humans. Other studies have suggested that Homo erectus evolved in Africa, where separate populations eventually led to the emergence of later hominin species, such as Homo heidelbergensis, and ultimately our own species, Homo sapiens. At the beginning of its time period, about 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus coexisted with several other early human species in East Africa, including Homo rudolphifensis, Homo habilis, and Paranthropus boisei. Sometimes fossils of these different species have even been found in the same locations, indicating that they shared territory and resources. At the end of its period, around 100,000 years ago, Homo erectus probably coexisted with Homo floresiensis in Indonesia. Given the timing and geographic location, it is possible that they interacted and even interbred with the mysterious Denisovans of Southeast Asia.
This could potentially explain the ghost genomes discovered in Denisovan remains that scientists have been able to extract from a pinky bone and 2 tusks found in Denisova Cave in Siberia. How did Homo erectus hunt and gather food? Their bipedalism, slender build, and hairless skin have suggested that persistent hunting was a key strategy for obtaining meat, which facilitated effective temperature regulation through sweating during long pursuits. Homo erectus could potentially run without water for up to 5.5 hours. This would have given them a significant advantage in outrunning their prey, establishing them as highly successful hunters. Their hunting strategies and prey selection depended on the resources available in their respective regions and habitats. But Homo erectus is thought to have been a versatile hunter-gatherer, hunting a variety of animals for a living. Evidence suggests that they hunted birds, deer, wild boar, and even elephants. In 1988, scientists found the remains of an elephant and numerous fragmentary skeletons and 400 flake tools from a large, now extinct baboon near Olo, Kenya, dating from 790 to 992,000 years ago. Many of the bones bore clear cut marks, and the animal's limbs were missing. If these animals were truly hunted rather than scavenged, it would have required great skill to destroy such powerful animals, indicating that Homo erectus hunted in cooperative groups, suggesting that they probably had primitive language or communication systems. It is reasonable to assume that, like modern-day hunter-gatherers, such as the African sand bushmen and Australian aborigines, game meat was part of the diet of Homo erectus. Other food sources may have included snakes, birds and their eggs, locusts, scorpions, centipedes, tortoises, rats, hedgehogs, fish, and crustaceans. Even children would have caught many of these, as is still the case today in the Kalahari Desert of Africa, then allowed to accompany their older males on more dangerous hunts. Plant foods, such as fleshy leaves, fruits, nuts, roots, and tubers, were also important in their diet. For example, hordes of hackberry seeds have been found in the Zhuqian cave in China, where the famous Peking man Homo erectus fossil was discovered. Homo erectus was omnivorous, an opportunistic feeding strategy that provided the greatest flexibility. Modern humans are the most opportunistic of all living primates, and Homo erectus was probably one of the earliest hominids to develop this trait, giving the species adaptability and evolutionary flexibility. Although Homo erectus were skilled hunters for their time, they were undoubtedly also prey to the predators that shared their environment. 2/3 of the Homo erectus fossils found in Longguqin, China, had damage consistent with damage caused by carnivores' teeth, probably hyenas. The bite marks on a well-fossilized crushed Homo erectus skull found in Longguqin perfectly match the teeth of the extinct giant hyena Pachycrota brevirostris, or short-faced hyena. Another cave in Zhuqian, China, contains skeletal material from Homo erectus individuals scattered across the cave floor, measuring up to 9 meters in diameter. Analysis has shown that 67% of these Homo erectus remains show bite marks or other changes that are attributable to large mammalian carnivores. The presence of dangerous predators likely caused Homo erectus to face intense competition and constant vigilance, which led to a heightened state of alertness and fear. Their ability to form groups and cooperate for protection would have been an important advantage. But for some unlucky individuals, they would have become food for ancient hunters. What tools did Homo erectus use? They started out with simple but effective hand axes for hunting and butchering, but later in their evolutionary timeline, these hand axes became increasingly sophisticated, marking significant improvements in their tool technology and showing the mental progress of these early humans. The earliest hand axes associated with Homo erectus are the type found in the Olaviti Gorge in Tanzania, where they were discovered in large numbers.
These early hammers were characterized by their simple construction, using mainly core forms. These cores were river pebbles or similar rocks that had been struck with a rounded hammerstone to produce a conoidal fracture that removed flakes from one surface, creating an edge and often a sharp tip. The blunt end of these tools is called the proximal surface, and the sharp end is the distal surface. The older one is a percussion technique that grips the proximal surface. Hominids would bring the distal surface down forcefully on an object they wanted to dislodge or break, such as a bone or tuber. A few 100,000 years before the evolution of Homo erectus, tool-making you will find more complex hand axes named after the site of Sant'Iturrara in France. These tools evolved about 1.76 million years ago. Acheulean tools were characterized not by a core, but by a two-sided face that worked in both directions. The most notable form was the hand axe. The earliest Acheulean axes appear in the West Turkana region of Kenya and in South Africa at about the same time. Acheulean axes are large, heavy, and have sharp cutting edges that are cut in a teardrop shape from opposite sides. Unlike an Acheulean, which is the result of an accidental and perhaps temporary operation on a stone to obtain a sharp edge, Acheulean tool is the result of a planned manufacturing process. The maker starts with a blank, either a larger stone or a slab torn from a larger stone. From this blank, the maker removes large flakes to use as a core. Standing with a core on an anvil stone, the maker strikes the exposed end with a hard hammer to give the tool a rough shape. The piece must then be reworked or retouched with a soft hammer of wood or bone to create a tool that cuts finely and intersects two convex surfaces with a sharp edge. These complex Acheulean hand axes have survived for over 1 million years with little change from the earliest versions, indicating their skill and suggesting that there was no need for improvement. Although the fossil remains of toolmakers are not always preserved alongside the tools, these hand axes clearly preserve the evolution of the inventions, craftsmanship, acquired intelligence, and social behavior of earlier human communities over a period of millions of years. Homo erectus also made other tools. Evidence shows that they made tools from shells at the sites of Sangaran and Trinil. Round stones measuring 6 to 12 centimeters and 2.4 to 7.5 centimeters in diameter are often found at African and Chinese Lower Paleolithic sites. And they were probably used as bolas, throwing weapons with weights attached to ropes used to restrain prey. Beyond tools, did Homo erectus build shelters? The evidence suggests that they built structures for protection. There is evidence that Homo erectus built 50-foot-long branch huts for shelter, sometimes with stone slabs or animal skins for the floor. The first houses are thought to have been simple windbreaks made of animal skins stretched over a frame. The oldest recognized shelter from this period was found in 1960 at the site of Terra Amata near Nice, France. The shelter was a collection of 12 separate oval structures that ranged from 26 to 49 feet long and 13 to 20 feet wide. Homo erectus used fire to keep warm, and the huts within these shelters were surrounded by small stones to create fire lines along the edges of holes dug for wood. Another notable site was discovered near present-day Bilsing-Laben in eastern Germany, where the early humans were thought to have been Homo erectus, although some argue that they were probably Homo heidelbergensis about 350,000 years ago. They built shelters similar to those of the Bushmen of South Africa. Circular structures with bases of bone and stone, 9 to 13 feet wide. In the center of each circle, archaeologists found an ivory tusk, which they speculated might have served as a centerpiece. These discoveries point to a species whose behavior was much more complex than previously thought. Those who were able to modify their environment to create secure habitats used fire for warmth and protection, and organized their living spaces in ways that indicated social structure and cooperation.
In the next section, we will explore one of the most transformative technologies mastered by Homo erectus: fire. and how this discovery fundamentally changed the course of human evolution. One of the most revolutionary aspects of Homo erectus culture was their mastery of fire. The controlled use of fire fundamentally transformed human evolution, enabling our ancestors to ward off predators, extend their waking hours after sunset, cook their food, and eventually colonize cold regions of the planet. Being able to produce and maintain fire meant that Homo erectus gained unprecedented control over their environment and diet that no previous species had achieved. Cooking food was particularly transformative. Cooked meat was not only safer, with fewer pathogens, but it was also much easier to digest. The cooking process breaks down the tough fibers of meat and plant foods, allowing for more efficient nutrient extraction with less digestive effort. This may have led to a reduced gut size in the Homo erectus fossil record compared to earlier hominins, potentially freeing up energy for brain development. But exactly when our ancestors first used fire is one of the most heated debates in paleoanthropology. Why? Because campfires rarely preserve well for long periods of time, let alone millions or even trillions of years. Despite these preservation challenges, Homo erectus is widely credited with being the first human ancestor to use fire. Homo erectus, with its relatively stable technology and behavioral patterns, may not have been able to overcome the challenges it faced. One controversial study even suggests that laziness and conservative tendencies contributed to its demise. Researchers point to sites in beautiful Indonesia where Homo erectus made tools using local, low-quality stone rather than traveling a short distance to gather better materials to make more effective tools. This apparent reluctance to innovate or make extra effort for better results may have worsened as environmental conditions changed. However, many paleontologists have criticized this explanation for imposing modern value judgments on ancient hominins who operated under completely different constraints and pressures. It is important to recognize that the concept of extinction may not be the most accurate way to describe what happened to Homo erectus. Many researchers now believe that Homo erectus did not just die out, but rather evolved into new species of hominins, such as Homo heidelbergensis in some regions. This evolution likely involved interbreeding with other hominin species as they came into contact, creating complex patterns of genetic exchange that are now beginning to be understood through ancient DNA analysis. The story of Homo erectus raises profound questions about human evolution and the nature of species boundaries. Rather than seeing human evolution as a linear progression from one species to another, the evidence increasingly suggests a complex, branching tangle of different hominins who sometimes coexisted, competed, and interbred. Homo erectus does not represent a failed experiment or evolutionary dead end, but rather an important foundation on which later human diversity would build. One fascinating aspect of Homo erectus that we have yet to explore is their apparent adaptability to extreme altitudes. Recent discoveries suggest that Homo erectus was able to colonize high-altitude environments much earlier than previously thought. Archaeological evidence from the Tibetan Plateau indicates that hominins lived at altitudes of over 4,000 meters 1.6 million years ago, a time when Homo erectus was the dominant hominin species in East Asia. Living at such high altitudes poses serious physiological challenges. Modern humans who cannot adapt to high altitudes experience hypoxia, a lack of oxygen, which can lead to life-threatening conditions such as altitude sickness, reduced physical capacity, and even pulmonary or cerebral edema. The fact that Homo erectus was apparently able to survive in this environment suggests that they developed biological adaptations to cope with the reduced oxygen levels.
Adaptations that may have later been transferred to modern high-altitude populations through interbreeding or shared lineages. This high-altitude colonization demonstrates another way in which Homo erectus proved remarkably adaptable, pushing into environments that would have seemed prohibitive to earlier hominin species. From coastal environments to mountains, from tropical forests to open savannas, Homo erectus was able to thrive across an astonishing range of habitats, a versatility that foreshadows the global spread of later human species. Another area of ongoing research is the relationship of Homo erectus to water beyond the previously mentioned possible seafaring evidence. Some researchers have proposed what is known as the aquatic ape hypothesis to explain some Homo erectus traits. This controversial theory suggests that some of our human traits, including our relative hairlessness, subcutaneous fat distribution, and voluntary breathing control, may have evolved at a time when our ancestors spent significant amounts of time in shallow water environments, perhaps wading, swimming, and searching for marine resources. Although mainstream paleontology has largely rejected the most robust versions of this hypothesis, there is growing evidence that coastal and riverine resources played an important role in Homo erectus subsistence strategies. Archaeological sites along ancient coasts show evidence of shellfish consumption, fish processing, and other aquatic resource use for millions of years. The ability to utilize these rich food sources, rich in protein and omega-3 fatty acids, may have provided important nutritional benefits that supported brain development. Some researchers speculate that access to these brain-boosting nutrients may have contributed to the encephalization that characterized Homo erectus evolution. We have focused extensively on Homo erectus biology and technology, but what about their potential mental and social lives? While we may never know for sure what the internal experiences of extinct species were like, archaeological evidence provides some intriguing clues. The previously mentioned care for injured and disabled individuals suggests social bonds that went beyond mere survival utility. The fact that Homo erectus groups supported members who could no longer fully contribute to subsistence activities also suggests emotional attachment and perhaps concepts of mutual care that extended beyond the immediate family unit. Some sites also suggest possible religious behavior. The arrangement of stone tools and animal remains at certain Homo erectus sites shows patterns that appear to be intentional rather than purely functional. Although we should be cautious about projecting modern human symbolic thought onto ancient species, these patterns nevertheless indicate the beginnings of ritualized behavior that may have strengthened group identity and social cohesion. The possible collection and modification of objects without obvious utilitarian purposes, such as the previously mentioned ochre dye and possible symbolic objects, further suggests that Homo erectus may have possessed a cognitive basis for aesthetic perception and perhaps early symbolic thought. These abilities, although much less developed than those of modern humans, would represent an important step toward the rich symbolic and cultural world that characterizes later human species. An interesting area of speculation concerns how Homo erectus understood their world. Without complex language or writing, their conceptual framework would have been based largely on direct experience rather than abstract classification. Their knowledge was deeply embedded in specific landscapes, transmitted through demonstration and imitation rather than explicit instruction. Some cognitive archaeologists suggest that Homo erectus may have had what is known as imitative culture, the ability to represent knowledge through deliberate physical movements such as gestures, dance, and non-linguistic vocalizations. This form of communication was more sophisticated than that of great apes, but less complex than fully syntactic languages, allowing them to share information about tool-making techniques, hunting strategies, and environmental knowledge. This imitative ability may explain how Homo erectus was able to maintain a relatively consistent tool-making tradition across vast geographic regions and time periods without written instructions or complex verbal explanations. The stability of their technological heritage over millions of years suggests an effective mechanism for transmitting knowledge that relied largely on observation and imitation. The social structure of Homo erectus groups remains speculative, but some clues come from comparisons with great apes and modern hunter-gatherers, as well as from the archaeological record. Sexual dimorphism in Homo erectus, although less pronounced than in great apes, suggests that males were slightly larger than females, which may indicate some degree of male dominance or competition. However, the cooperative hunting strategies attested at sites such as Olga Sai in Kenya suggest coordination among multiple individuals, a level of cooperation that usually requires relatively egalitarian social relationships. The most likely scenario is that Homo erectus lived in small, flexible bands with fluid membership, similar but perhaps less complex than modern hunter-gatherers. Within these groups, knowledge about resources, territory, and strategies was shared through direct demonstration and accumulated through experience. Ancients could have been particularly valuable as repositories of ecological knowledge, knowing where to find water during droughts, which plants were edible in different seasons, or how to predict animal migrations based on subtle environmental cues. As we piece together the story of Homo erectus from fragmentary fossils and archaeological evidence, one thing becomes increasingly clear. These were not simple primitive creatures far removed from their ape ancestors. They were complex creatures with extraordinary adaptations, social lives, and cognitive abilities that helped them thrive across vast expanses of time and space. Their legacy lives on not only in the fossil record, but potentially in our own genomes and behavior. Recent genetic studies have detected ancient hominin DNA in modern human populations that does not match the known Neanderthal or Denisovan signatures. Some researchers speculate that this genetic material may represent the contribution of Homo erectus to our genomes through interbreeding events that occurred before our species fully diverged from other hominin lineages. If confirmed, this would mean that Homo erectus survived not only as an ancestral species, but also as a direct genetic contributor to modern human diversity. The cultural and technological legacy of Homo erectus is even deeper. Many of the fundamental technologies and adaptations that define humanity, from the controlled use of fire to the making of sophisticated stone tools, from wide geographic ranges to cooperative hunting, first emerged or significantly evolved during the long reign of Homo erectus. In a very real sense, they laid the foundation for everything that would come to pass in human evolution. When we reflect on the 3 continents and countless environmental changes that have taken place over the course of 2 million years of Earth's history, we gain perspective on the brief existence of our own species. Modern Homo sapiens has only been around for about 300,000 years, about 15% of the time span of Homo erectus. Our global civilization, with its cities, agriculture, and digital technologies, represents less than 1% of that time span. The long success of Homo erectus reminds us that evolutionary success is not measured simply by technological complexity or cultural sophistication, but by adaptability and resilience to changing circumstances. By this measure, Homo erectus ranks among the most successful mammals to have ever walked the earth, not just among the hominins. Their story also challenges us to rethink what it means to be human.
The traditional narrative of human evolution often depicts a linear progression from primitive to advanced, with each new species representing an improvement on the previous species. But the picture emerging from paleoanthropology suggests something more complex and fascinating. Human species are a diverse family tree, each with unique adaptations and capabilities, sometimes competitive and sometimes interbreeding. Part of the rich tapestry of human evolution, Homo erectus was not a failed experiment or an incomplete blueprint for humanity. They were a remarkably successful species in their own right, perfectly suited to their time and place in evolutionary history. They eventually led the way for other human species, including our own. And the fact that they pioneered many of the traits and technologies that we now consider fundamentally human does not diminish their remarkable achievement. While our own species faces unprecedented environmental challenges, from climate change to resource depletion, the story of Homo erectus offers both inspiration and caution. Their extraordinary adaptive abilities enabled them to thrive in a variety of environments for almost unimaginable periods of time. But ultimately, they were unable to overcome the combined challenges of rapid climate change and competition with technologically advanced species. When we think about the legacy of Homo erectus, perhaps their most profound contribution to human evolution was not a specific technology or adaptation, but rather the pioneering of a new ecological niche, which anthropologists call the human adaptive niche. This unique position in the Earth's ecosystem involved using cultural and technological innovations to combat environmental challenges, rather than relying solely on biological adaptations that typically evolve over thousands of generations. Homo erectus was the first species to significantly expand this distinctively human way of surviving. While earlier hominins had shown glimpses of cultural adaptation, Homo erectus took this strategy to an unprecedented level, making a variety of tools, controlling fire, expanding into challenging environments, and developing social systems that allowed knowledge to be stored and disseminated across generations. This shift fundamentally altered the course of human evolution. Natural selection began to act not only on physical characteristics, but also on increasingly cognitive and social abilities that enhanced cultural innovation and transmission. This created a feedback loop
between biological and cultural evolution that would eventually produce our own species with an unprecedented capacity for symbolic thought, complex language, and technological innovation. Recent excavations at sites in Ethiopia have uncovered evidence that challenges traditional views of Homo erectus's abilities. Stone tools found at Gona demonstrate a level of craftsmanship previously thought beyond their capabilities. The precisely shaped tools reveal careful selection of raw materials and sophisticated flaking techniques that required not only tool skills, but also advanced planning and spatial reasoning. What is particularly interesting about these discoveries is their age. Approximately 1.66 million years ago. They show that Homo erectus achieved this level of technological sophistication much earlier than previously thought. This pushes back the timeline of advanced knowledge in human evolution and suggests that the mental abilities of Homo erectus have been systematically underestimated. The geographic distribution of these advanced tools tells us something important about Homo erectus society. Similar technological heritage has been found in widely separated regions, indicating a kind of cultural transmission process that allowed for the spread of innovations among different Homo erectus groups. This points to social networks and intergroup communication that would have facilitated not only technological sharing, but also potentially the exchange of mates, resource information, and other important survival knowledge. Another overlooked aspect of Homo erectus's life is its relationships with other species. Beyond hunting and predator avoidance, there is evidence that Homo erectus may have engaged in a pattern of proto-domestication, the beginning of complex relationships between humans and other species that would later evolve into full-fledged domestication. At several Homo erectus sites, archaeologists have found unusual densities of some animal species that do not match natural accumulation patterns. These densities may be the earliest evidence of humans creating ecological niches that attracted specific animals, perhaps by clearing vegetation or creating water features that attracted specific prey species. While this falls far short of the deliberate breeding programs that characterize true domestication, it represents the first step toward human manipulation of the evolutionary trajectory of other species, a process that would eventually transform wolves into dogs, wild grains into crops, and reshape the Earth's biosphere in countless ways. The cognitive implications of such environmental manipulation are significant. It suggests that Homo erectus had acquired some understanding of cause and effect over time, recognizing that altering the landscape in certain ways would attract certain animals, potentially making hunting more predictable and efficient. This capacity for environmental engineering represents another way in which Homo erectus surpassed earlier hominin species. Rather than simply adapting to their environment, they began the distinctively human practice of adapting the environment to suit their needs, a strategy that would reach its apotheosis in modern human civilization, but its roots lie in the behavior of these ancient pioneers. The question of Homo erectus's consciousness is one of the most fascinating and elusive aspects of their existence. While we can never directly access the personal experiences of an extinct species, the archaeological record provides interesting clues about their mental world. The level of explicit planning in their more sophisticated tools suggests that they possessed what psychologists call autonoetic consciousness, the ability to mentally project themselves into the future and plan accordingly. This ability to travel mentally in time represents a significant cognitive leap beyond the primarily present-oriented consciousness of most non-human animals. Similarly, their care for injured group members suggests a form of empathy and even theory of mind, the ability to recognize that the mental states of others are different from their own. The long-term care evidenced by healed injuries in some fossils suggests that they understood the suffering of others and were motivated to alleviate it. Cognitive and mental abilities that we usually associate with advanced consciousness. Even more intriguing are the hints of aesthetic sensitivity and possible symbolic thinking in the collection of colorful materials and possible artistic productions. These behaviors suggest that Homo erectus could experience personal states beyond the mere calculation of survival. Perhaps the beginnings of aesthetic appreciation, curiosity, and wonder that characterize the human consciousness we know today. While their mental world was undoubtedly different from ours, lacking the complex language and stored cultural knowledge that make up modern human consciousness, it would be a mistake to view Homo erectus simply as instinctively driven automatons. Archaeological evidence paints a picture of animals with rich personal experiences, social bonds, stored knowledge, and even the beginnings of symbolic thought. As we continue to discover new evidence and develop more sophisticated analytical techniques, our understanding of Homo erectus is evolving. Recent methodological innovations have allowed researchers to extract new types of information from long-studied fossils, revolutionizing the picture of these ancient humans. Advanced imaging techniques, such as micro-CT scanning, have revealed internal bone structures that provide insights into growth patterns, diet, and health status that are not visible from external examination alone.
Isotope analysis of teeth has opened windows into patterns of seasonal migration and dietary changes over individual lifetimes. Ancient protein analysis is beginning to complement DNA research, providing molecular evidence from samples too old to have genetic material survive. These methodological advances have transformed Homo erectus from a relatively stable, one-dimensional species in the textbooks to a dynamic, diverse, and complex branch of the human family tree. We now recognize significant regional variation, evolutionary change over time, and subtle adaptations to different environments that can paint a much more sophisticated picture than previous generations of researchers had access to. Looking ahead, emergent technologies promise to further revolutionize our understanding. Improvements in ancient DNA recovery techniques may make it possible to extract genetic material from Homo erectus fossils, despite their age and often challenging preservation conditions. This will provide unprecedented insights into their evolutionary relationships, possible interbreeding with other hominin species, and genetic adaptations to different environments.
Meanwhile, agent-based modeling and other computational methods will allow researchers to test hypotheses about Homo erectus's social structure, movement patterns, and ecological relationships that cannot be directly tested through archaeological evidence alone. By combining traditional archaeology with cutting-edge technology and computational methods, these approaches represent the future of paleoanthropology. What lessons can we learn from the story of Homo erectus that can inform our understanding of the future of our own species? Perhaps most worryingly, even extraordinary evolutionary success does not guarantee survival indefinitely. After thriving for 2 million years, a period that dwarfed the existence of our own species, Homo erectus eventually disappeared, unable to adapt to the combined pressures of climate change and competition. This provides a powerful reminder of the fragility of even highly adaptable species. Our own global civilization faces unprecedented challenges such as climate change, resource depletion, and biodiversity loss. The fossil record reminds us that no species, no matter how successful, is guaranteed to survive when environmental conditions change dramatically. Yet the story of Homo erectus also offers hope. Their extraordinary adaptive abilities helped them pioneer the survival strategies that eventually led to our own species. They demonstrated the power of cultural innovation, social cooperation, and technological development to overcome environmental challenges, strategies that may help us meet the challenges of our own time. The key difference is the timescale of change. Homo erectus faced environmental change over thousands of years, which allowed time for cultural and biological adaptation. Today's anthropogenic climate change is occurring at a pace unprecedented in the history of human evolution, compressing into a matter of decades changes that would normally take millennia. This compression requires a level of foresight, global cooperation, and technological innovation beyond anything our evolutionary history has prepared us for. Yet the seeds of this power were planted by Homo erectus when they expanded the space in which the first humans adapted to include cultural and technological buffers against environmental change. In this sense, we owe our potential to overcome today's challenges to the innovations pioneered by these ancient relatives nearly 2 million years ago. Their legacy lives on not only in our physiology and perhaps our genome, but also in the distinctive human strategy of using cultural and technological innovations to overcome biological constraints. As we conclude this exploration of Homo erectus, we return to the remarkable span of their existence. For nearly 2 million years, a period so vast that it defies our comprehension, these creatures walked the earth. They witnessed countless generations, ice ages, changing landscapes, and the rise and fall of countless animal species.
They spread across 3 continents, adapting to environments from tropical forests to high-altitude plateaus, and pioneering technologies that transformed the course of human evolution. Their story is not a footnote in human evolution or a primitive introduction to our own species. It represents the most successful chapter in the history of human evolution. It is a testament to the extraordinary adaptability, resilience, and innovative capacity of our ancient relatives. By studying Homo erectus, we gain insight not only into the origins of humans, but also into what it means to be evolutionarily successful as humans. The true legacy of Homo erectus lies not only in the fossils and artifacts they left behind, but also in their pioneering basic human abilities, technological innovation, social cooperation, ecological adaptability, and the cultural transmission of knowledge. Refined and elaborated through subsequent human evolution, these abilities remain at the core of what defines humanity today. So the next time you control fire to cook food, use a tool to solve a problem, adapt your behavior to a changing environment, or share knowledge with others, remember that you are using the abilities mastered by Homo erectus nearly 2 million years ago. Their evolutionary innovations echo through time, connecting us to the ancient past and shaping our ongoing human journey into the future.